This is the Land Rover Discovery Sport, and it's just had a facelift. Key among those changes are a lineup of new mild hybrid engines, which are said to boost efficiency up to 6%. Is that a lot? Not really. At least it's warm here.
It's also completely changed its underpinnings.
It's also even more practical than before, with more space inside. It's also got a new infotainment system. So the changes for the facelift are quite drastic, and it's rare that a facelift would bring quite such a comprehensive rework of a car. But the Discovery Sport's been on sale since 2014, and since then it's only really had light touches here and there to update it. These are the last big changes the car's going to have before it's replaced by a completely new model in 2023. So these updates better be made to count. From the outside, you wouldn't really guess that this is a massively different car from before. So you have a slightly different bumper design, new headlights as well, but apart from that, not much has changed. Inside, it is more noticeable, but before we take a closer look there, make sure you go to Whatcar.com to get the very best deal on a Land Rover Discovery Sport. There has been a serious lift in quality in the Discovery Sport from before the facelift to now. So there's a real good mix of high quality materials. It's especially nice on the dashboard. Look how squidgy that is. And everywhere really, there's just nice trim here, a nice brushed metal effect, and even all the dials have a nice damping and quality feel to them. So it's certainly very impressive in here. It's not quite up there with the BMW X3 and the Audi Q5, but it's certainly better than a Mercedes GLC.
The new infotainment system is largely the same as the one in the Range Rover Evoque. Its 10-inch touchscreen is sharp and you get plenty of connectivity including Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you don't get those on the entry-level trim. True, the screen can sometimes be a bit sluggish to respond to touch inputs, and its operating system isn't as intuitive as the BMW X3's, but it's still one of the better systems in the large SUV class.
With the Discovery Sport, you are also getting one of the best driving positions of any SUV. So even things like the placement of this central armrest is bang on, and you sit genuinely high, so you get a proper SUV-like driving position. Good view out, it's comfortable, and you also have an interactive driver display, which gives you a configurable digital screen in front of where you're sitting here and shows you a variety of information. It's really good to have that. It's not quite as configurable as Audi's virtual cockpit, but it's still very impressive and very good to have. The switches for the electric windows are really very high on the door though, and takes a bit of getting used to. So I was driving and almost locked and unlocked the car, or changed my driving position with the memory function down here rather than actually just putting the window down. So that is very high, same for the door mirrors as well. But really, once you know it's there, it won't take that much getting used to. Another slight irritation is on the indicator stalks here. You can see for the lights, it has this kind of swivel action. So instead of moving this round and it clicking into place, you have to push it to the action you want it to do. And then when you release it, it just goes back to the middle. So I just find it difficult to know whether what you've done is actually going to happen, especially when on the other side, you can see here, this bit moves with the stalk. So it's on intermittently, or it's off. So I don't really understand why they haven't just done exactly the same for the other side and instead having this kind of switch action. It seems like a bit of over-engineering if you ask me. Anyway, space up front is brilliant. There's absolutely loads of headroom. Legroom is some of the most impressive in the class as well. You'd have to be just enormous beyond comprehension to be able to feel cramped up front here. The storage is great too, so under this well-placed central armrest you have an enormous area to store whatever you need, with a couple of USB ports too. And also in front of that, you've got this kind of handy rubberized place to put keys or loose change. Underneath, you can see there's a couple of cup holders, and you can even get rid of all of this, freeing up this massive space down here. So that is very impressive from a storage point of view. And also in front of the gear selector, you've got another tray there and some massive door bins too. So very impressive up front. Now these rear seats can move forwards and back, and when they're as far back as they go, there's absolutely loads of room back here. I mean, compared to other big cars like the X3, the Q5, Mercedes GLC, there's absolutely loads of room here. Legroom is especially impressive, and headroom, you can see even with a sunroof, it's really airy, loads of room. It's just very, very, very comfortable. Even if you had three pretty tall adults in the back here, it should be pretty good. But the Discovery Sport is available as a 7-seater. So what are the very rear seats like? Well, access to them isn't particularly brilliant. So you've got to move this seat forwards, which is fine, but you can see the wheel arch kind of bulges into this area, so you're left with quite a slim space to try and clamber through to get into the back. And then when you do eventually get into the back, it does not take very long to realise that there isn't much room back here. So you can see space back here isn't great. Headroom, very tight, and you can move these middle seats forwards, but even if you do, legroom really isn't great. And also you've got a really shallow footwell, so it means your knees are pushed up quite high, pretty much around your ears. And also a really annoying thing is that to use this third row, you've got to get rid of the boot cover, but there isn't anywhere to put it. So you're either stuck with it back here, or you've got to plan a bit more effectively and leave it in your garage, if you've got one, or your living room beforehand. So that's a bit annoying, isn't it?
Still, this and the Mercedes GLB are the only premium badged car of this size to offer 7 seats. But if you're willing to go non-premium, the Peugeot 5008 and Hyundai Santa Fe have more spacious third rows. But these third row seats can be folded fully into the boot floor when they're not needed. And this middle row can fold down from the back as well.
The boot is, as you can see, big. It's very simple, square shape. There's nothing particularly fancy to point out. No underfloor storage. There's just a kind of storage net thing on one side. And to give you an idea of just how practical it is compared to everything else, we could fit 8 carry-on size suitcases into the boot of a Discovery Sport, whereas with an Audi Q5 we could fit 9. But still very practical and should be able to cope with a family's everyday life without any problem at all. You can also get an electric tailgate on the top 2 trims, but you can't get a gesture control tailgate. So one of those things where you hold the key and wave your foot under the back of the car for about 10 minutes trying to open it. But how expensive is the Discovery Sport? We've established that it is indeed very practical, but what's it really like to buy and own one? These are the key things you need to know. The Discovery Sport is priced competitively against 5-seat premium rivals like the BMW X3 and Audi Q5, and it's more versatile than them as well. But when you compare it to more mainstream rivals like the Peugeot 5008 and Skoda Kodiaq, it's expensive. Still, if you're willing to pay for the Discovery Sport's upmarket image, then you can be reassured that it will hold on to its value very well. This also means that it is relatively competitive on PCP finance deals. We'll explain what the mild hybrid technology does in a minute, but even with it fitted, the engines aren't as economical as its rivals, so it will cost more to fuel a Discovery Sport than its competitors. Reliability is not a strength of Land Rover. The British brand came bottom out of 31 manufacturers in our latest reliability survey, with the Discovery Sport proving to be one of the least dependable cars in its class. Still, every Discovery Sport gets a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, which includes UK and European roadside assistance. So that doesn't mean it won't go wrong, but it should mean you're not faced with a massive bill if it does. The Discovery Sport once set the standards for safety in this class, receiving the full 5-star verdict from Euro NCAP back in 2015. However, it should be noted that the crash safety tests today are far more stringent than they were back then. Automatic emergency braking and lane keeping assistance is standard on every Discovery Sport. Traffic sign recognition, which displays the speed limit on the driver display, comes with everything apart from the entry-level trim, while blind spot monitoring is available from SE trim and up. There are 5 engines to choose from in the Discovery Sport, and that is 2 petrols and 3 diesels. Of the petrols, even the weaker P200 still feels pretty quick. So around town it's absolutely fine, and on the motorway as well it's good, but you do have to rev it quite hard if you're going to go for an overtake. So the P250, unsurprisingly, offers more power, although neither of the petrols offer the low rev pulling power that the diesel engines offer. So for them, the D180 is probably the pick of the range when you take into consideration the performance and the fuel economy as well. But it's not perfect, because even that engine is the one that we've got here, and it does feel a bit weak for a car this size. So if you have a full to the tilt car, loads of luggage, loads of heavy passengers as well, and you're trying to go up a really, really steep incline, then yeah, you feel like this might struggle a bit. If you are going to be maybe driving over more challenging terrain quickly, or you're going to be doing a lot of towing, then it might be worth considering the diesel D240, because that offers noticeably better low to mid-range pulling power. But probably the sensible choice is the D180, and really, in most situations this car is going to find itself in, it's not going to struggle. All versions with an automatic gearbox use mild hybrid technology. In essence, this uses a battery that can power things like the air conditioning and power steering, allowing the engine to be switched off when decelerating. And that saves fuel. But as previously mentioned, it's still not a very economical car. Now, as for the ride, things are a bit lumpy around town if you've gone for the massive supersized 20-inch or 21-inch wheels. But the good news is that if you go for the smaller 18 or 19-inch alloys, the ride improves and it just takes the edge off it. On the motorway, regardless of what wheel size you go for, this car is incredibly relaxing. So mile munching is absolutely effortless in the Discovery Sport. It really is very relaxing over long distances. But when you're off the motorway and you come to a winding bit of country road, then the Discovery Sport doesn't seem quite so impressive because there's a noticeable amount of body lean through corners, much more so than you get in an X3 or a Q5. Remember also you've got the Jaguar F-Pace in this class, which is a good SUV to drive. The diesel engines are really hushed when cruising, but both make their presence known when you're getting up to speed. You'll feel some vibration through the controls and hear a degree of diesel clatter as well. For the most refined diesels in this class, try the excellent Q540 TDI or X3 20D. The petrols are smoother and quieter by comparison, although when you rev them hard, they do sound quite gruff. But overall, when you take into account the wind noise in the Discovery Sport and the road roar that it generates as well, then an X3 and a Q5 are both significantly quieter.
So if you want to buy a Land Rover Discovery Sport through Whatcar, this is the best way to spec it.
You're going to need some paint. There are metallic paint options, but if you spend a bit more money, you can get some premium choices like this Namib Orange. Before you get as far as choosing a trim level, you've got to decide whether you want a regular Discovery Sport or an R Dynamic version. The latter simply adds some sportier styling touches and costs a bit more money, but it's identical underneath. Both versions come with a hefty equipment list that includes dual zone climate control, the 10-inch touchscreen infotainment system, and a full roster of off-road systems, including terrain response 2, hill descent control, and low traction launch. You then have a choice of trims, so there's S, SE and HSE, but we reckon S is the one to go for because you get a sensible size of alloy wheels, 18 inches so the ride is still comfortable, plus you get things like electrically adjustable front seats that are heated as well, along with a leather interior which you can swap for a synthetic alternative if you prefer for no cost. For fuel economy and performance, the diesel D180 is the best all-round engine in the lineup. You can also add some extra USB ports. If you're not fussed about leather steering wheels, then you can have a suede cloth one as an alternative for no extra cost. We'd also consider adding the interactive driver display, more so than the head-up display. If you hadn't noticed, it's a big car, so the park pack helps make squeezing into parking spaces easier. It'll steer itself into a space for you, you get a 360-degree camera, and there's a rear traffic monitor to help stop you reversing out into oncoming traffic. It's reasonably priced. So that was everything you need to know about the Land Rover Discovery Sport. If you've enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to our channel? Because we have loads of video reviews like this on every single new car that goes on sale. So we've got loads of SUVs, we've got loads of electric cars, off-roaders, supercars, everything you'll find on our channel.